Hi, it's Gary Moore here, 95.5 KLOS, and a little show I do every week called Get the Lead Out, and I'm joined today by honest-to-God rock royalty. We have guys here that have stories. We have a gentleman here named Henry Smith, manager of the YardBirds, tour manager of the YardBirds, and one of the original founding members of the YardBirds. To his extreme left, Mr. Chris Dreja. Chris,
okay, hi.
Welcome,
Yeah.
welcome.
Welcome.
Good to have both of you here. Now, they're here because the YardBirds have 3 rave-ups here in Los Angeles and in the area in the next couple of days. We're taping this on Tuesday, the 20th. Tomorrow night on Sunset at the Key Club. Thursday night, the Coach House down in San Juan Capistrano. Great place to play. Wonderful. You're going to love it. Everybody loves it down there. And then Friday night out in Agora at the Canyon Club. So we're going to be talking about that. But I want to talk with Chris, first of all, not only a founding member of the YardBirds, not only a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but also the guy who took this picture of the first time anybody ever saw Led Zeppelin on an album.
Yeah.
Chris took this picture. How did that come about? How did you get this gig?
Well, 21 guineas was helpful. No, actually, my other great passion in life is photography, and of course I photographed guys and things on the road, and I photographed Jimmy a lot because he and I got on well, and I made his eyes look good. And,
did you really?
Yeah, I did actually. And so when the guys, got their record deal, I guess I had a studio in London, and Jimmy and Peter, who I was great friends with, they asked me to do their liner cover, so I didn't really know what I was doing at the time in photography, but I did it, and it's just extraordinary. Since I've actually had a 32-year career in photography, that's the one shot everybody remembers.
What do you remember about that session?
what is that?
What was that session like? What's some of the things you remember from the session?
Let me tell you. Let me tell you, guys. That's all I remember.
Let me tell you.
Yeah, let me tell you. Well, the thing is, I knew Jimmy very well, of course.
Right.
We'd slept together and all that stuff.
Okay.
And, by that time.
Platonically, of course.
Absolutely, as I had done with Eric and a few other people. Right. But, the thing is that I went to the auditions with John Bonham and Robert Plant when Jimmy was looking to sort of make up the numbers. And they were just guys, from this Birmingham provincial town, didn't know anything that was going to come their way or the future. It was all, And of course, when I photographed them, they were incredibly innocent. And this is the original photograph, because all you got is the liner.
Right.
And of course, although Jimmy was a bit of a poser at that point, Robert and John, he's got a Pringle sweater on, I tell you.
Show the folks at home here what.
Okay. So this is folks, this is how nice and lovely they were. Very innocent.
Before they came for your children, before they came for your daughters and wives.
Lock up your wives and daughters' store.
And interestingly enough, I photographed them. Peter asked me to photograph them a couple of years later, when they had already marauded wives and daughters.
Conquered the world, in effect.
The world.
Yeah.
And that's the wrong photograph, sorry. Let me hold up another one. And by this time, John Bonham, of course, he discovered a few things. Didn't look much different, but he had long hair. And, of course, Robert Plant was incredibly sort of, here I am, out there, found his personality by that point.
They seem a bit more confident in that photo.
Just a little bit more confident, I would have thought. So this is the Pringle sweater shoot.
Right.
Lovely job. And this is the sort of more aggressive,
Sort of upgraded the wardrobe after that,
and,
exactly. The cable knit sweaters were gone.
Of course, this is the great shot. This is one from our tour.
One of my favorites.
This is one of my favorite shots. The man who made it all possible.
Right.
Mr. Peter Grant.
Peter Grant, who was the YardBirds manager before Led Zeppelin.
He was our manager
right.
as well, yeah.
He was the manager of the Stones, too, back in '62.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and most wonderful man. He changed rock.
And that was an everyday shot for him, basically, just inhaling money. That was his job, pretty much.
We did this for the IRS at the time.
Here's a lot of money you're not going to be getting, basically, right?
They are $100 notes, real ones, because I was there.
Right.
Helped fold them up, stuff up his nose. I styled the shot, and but he had a great sense of humour, Peter, and also he did change rock and roll for many musicians and record companies, and he changed all the percentages around. So actually, people may not know this, but they owe this guy a great debt.
Absolutely. Well, they always considered him the fifth member of Led Zeppelin. True or false? Let's clear up something here.
Sure.
Jimmy asked you to join the Zeppelin before John Paul Jones.
No, he did not.
Okay.
The story there, I mean, I obviously get asked this quite a lot recently, and as I said earlier, I have two passions. One was music, which is obviously sort of a great passion, and the other is photography, which also is a great passion. Now, we did 25 years on the road with the YardBirds. Actually, it was 5, but it felt like a lot more, didn't it, Henry, in terms of what we did.
And Henry was with you guys in the early days as well, correct?
He was, yeah.
In the later early days.
Yeah, he was. And what happened was basically Jim and Keith decided that, in fact, they wrote Jimmy and I a lawyer's note.
Keith Ralph,
Jim Mccarty, to say that they were coming off the road, don't book them anymore, blah, blah, blah. So we did one last great tour of America, which was a great tour, actually, because it was like, you were on it, and it was we got lost in Mexico, do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Death Valley, or something like that. And I mean, I would have stayed with the YardBirds. I loved playing with Jimmy. I went on to bass, and I really enjoyed that role.
Right.
Terrible bass player, but a lot of passion.
Sure.
A lot of, well, anyway, that's another story. But when I heard that, it wasn't going to be the YardBirds anymore, I'd already started to filter into photography, and I just wanted to wake up, on the morning, any morning, not reliant on a bunch of real crazy people. I really wanted to have my own destiny. Even Henry, because he was quite crazy. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to wake up and do something that from beginning to end I can control?
Almost a normal job.
Well, sort of, yes.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but
you wouldn't know about that.
No, not at all.
So I mean, both Peter and Jimmy knew that that was my destiny. I mean, maybe that's why they offered me the photograph. As a helping hand. Who knows?
Exactly.
But I mean, the thing is, I also knew John Paul Jones. What a gentleman! What a brilliant bass player!
Right, and a good arranger too.
All those things, and just a wonderful, all-round wonderful man.
He's probably the most unheralded player from Zeppelin. Because people always think of Jimmy and Robert, but Jonesy was really the one that held it all together, made everything work the way it works, was more Jonesy than probably anybody.
This is a good point to jump in because Henry's other job for many years was working with a little band called Led Zeppelin. How long were you there, and what did you do?
Well, at the end of the
keep the lollipop,
lick it again. At the end of the last YardBird tour, I was asked by Keith and Jim if I would stay with them and go to a band called Renaissance that they were starting. And at the same time, within the same week, I was asked by Jimmy Page if I would stay with him and go to a band that he didn't have a name of yet and didn't have all the players. And it was a hard decision. It really wasn't easy because it was more friends than it was business.
Right.
I mean, in the 60s, music wasn't a business. It was something you did because you loved it, and it was a passion. So I thought about it, and Jimmy came up to me again and said, I need to know. And I said, okay, I'll go with you. So I stuck it out with him.
And they had Peter, of course.
And Peter probably made a big dent in my head at the time, or would have made one if I didn't say yes. So I went that way, and it was wonderful.
All the years?
No, I didn't do all the years. I did with them until 73, and then I went with Aerosmith, another unknown band. Because
a good friend of yours was named Stephen. What was his originally? Stephen Tallarico. Yeah, changed it to Stephen Tyler. And you guys were friends in your teenage years, right?
Since teenager years, when he was about 14, we first met. Actually, I knew all the guys in the band before they knew each other.
And look what happened to them.
Yeah, look what happened to them.
You like being around with these
guys.
You like being around these bands that do Train Kept a Rollin'.
Yeah,
basically, is what it is. Find the bands that do Train Kept a Rollin'. Is what it is.
If I could find a girl band that would do Train Kept a Rollin'.
Exactly. Now, here's another true or false. True or false? You were part of the entourage that went to the countryside in Wales in 1970 with Jimmy and Robert.
Jimmy and Robert.
Really?
And I. It actually started off with Jimmy, Robert, and I, and then a guy named Sandy McGregor joined us, who was another roadie. Came up and brought us provisions, we won't go into what the provisions were, but brought us
the necessities.
For the necessities.
Yes, the creative necessities of a rock band.
A
Yeah.
place called Brun Ra, just a little stone building in the middle of a field.
It's like a shack.
Yeah, with sheep all around us. I mean, we would wake up in the morning and there'd be sheep nudging at the door.
And lots of mud.
Yeah.
It was on the side of a hill.
It was where Robert and his family went, I guess, as vacation there.
Yeah, they vacationed there. Yeah.
But no running water, no electricity.
No.
It was basically,
running water was up a hill. There was a little pump house.
and that's the great story a lot of Zeppelin fans have heard about, because it was after all this craziness from the end of 1968 through the middle of 1970, where there were tour after tour. There was tour after tour. The states all around the country, and then they just said enough of this. We're going to go back to the sticks, and that's where they came up with a lot of songs, not just for the third album, but on for the fourth album, Houses of the Holy. There was some stuff on there, and graffiti.
Some of the
and some
ideas
stuff.
came from
Yeah.
The songs weren't solidified
Right.
at that time, but a lot of the ideas.
Did they play those for you? Like if they'd been out walking around with a guitar, like they would do?
They would. I mean, during the day, a couple of times, Robert and I would go out and lay in the grass and move things around and look at the earth, and he'd would formulated some of the ideas of songs. Then at night, he and Jimmy would go in and play guitar, and Robert would hum some lines or his parts.
So you're at the beginning of many a future Zeppelin
song.
song.
In the beginning of that, and they would record them on a sloppy type of recorder, just so that we had some way of
Right. Remembering what you'd put down.
What you did, because I mean, as Chris can tell you, it's melody lines or lines come into your head and go real quick.
Well, it's the famous story of Keith Richards waking up in the middle of the night with Satisfaction and recording it,
Right.
and then letting the tape go, and then he hears himself snoring toward the end of it. But at least he got the riff down.
That's the same. Down, yeah.
That was it a week or 2 weeks, or how long were you guys there?
We were there a little over a week, I think.
Wow.
I don't think it was 2 weeks, but who remembers? It wasn't very long. We weren't there too long.
Now, Chris, you grew up in a suburb southwest of London. A place, was it Surbiton? Surbiton was there, but Surbigloom was what it ended up.
I was actually born in the Surrey Delta.
The Surrey Delta.
Yes, some wag named it recently, because so many guys who wanted to play the blues came from the Surrey Delta.
And see, that's the question I want to ask you. It's because I grew up in the South, and I can understand the first time you hear the blues that something happens. But explain to me how a bunch of skiffle-loving, lily-white, proper English gentlemen, and there's so many, heard the blues and not only were moved by it, but wanted to go out and make a living playing it. What was it about that music that affected you in that way?
Well, it's just extraordinary, isn't it? Because, I mean, we were literally from the provinces of England, and, well, the thing is, in England, you've got to remember that it was post-war, not that long before the war had ended. It was a very black and white period. I mean, the kids had nothing. Our music was second-hand Elvis Presley, very kitsch, nothing with great emotion. We didn't have the jazz, and so a few of us. I discovered that music through the first guitar player from the YardBirds, a guy called Topham,
right?
Whose father, I think, was in the Navy. Came back with a load of stuff from America. I mean, when I heard it, it was just I had never heard music like this before. It was just. I stayed up for 3 weeks, just pure excitement. The emotion, I mean, it just had everything.
How did you hear it? Where did it? Because as I recall, the radio was pretty.
No, I basically heard it from Top's father's collection.
Ah.
A 75 RPM collection.
78, yeah.
There were very, very few of us, actually, in the South, in London. I mean, there was a handful of musicians who discovered this music. And we were like the Night of the Living Dead. We walk around looking for each other, and we bump into each other at train stations. And somebody would have a Muddy Water album, and somebody would have a Howling Wolf, and we kind of literally maybe a dozen people. Brian Jones, kind of just a few people at that time who got turned onto this amazing music, and that was it. It was a revelation. How we had the guts or the gall to pretend to be blues musicians.
Well,
is extraordinary.
And not only that, but you guys backed one of the great blues musicians of all time.
And I have a story about that.
Sonny Boy Williamson, correct?
Yeah, well, Sonny Boy was the real thing.
Right.
I mean, he had feet coming out both ends of his feet, and he was like...
Yeah.
And a two-tone suit he bought from Savile Row, and... of course, you have to remember in those days that we didn't have an apartheid in our country. I mean, we didn't realize in America you had a real divide. Now, Sonny Boy was a big-time black music, black. He was a, Elvis Presley of his
of the blues and all
blues,
that, yeah.
And of course, for him, it was a revelation to come over to our country and play and have young girls sit on his lap and enjoy his music and everything else. And what they did in those days, our agency was the National Jazz Federation, and they were one of the first guys to see that market and bring over blues musicians. But they brought them over individually because the musicians' union was very tight, and especially the American, so you had to do a strict exchange. That's why they came over solo, these guys.
Right.
And they decided, well, we've got a few bands in our country who can back them up. They were the Animals up in Newcastle, and we were down south, and they matched us with various musicians. And we got Sonny Boy, who was fantastic. I mean, he was just unbelievable. But he used to get very drunk.
No, not Sonny Boy.
He used to get terribly drunk. And I remember rehearsing for that album we recorded.
Yeah, my bubbles burst.
Yeah, and I think that's how Keith discovered that bottle of whiskey in the suitcase. He copied young Sonny Boy here. Something he got from Sonny Boy, definitely, unfortunately.
Influenced you guys more than we know.
Yeah. But anyway, we backed Sonny Boy, and we actually did an album with him.
Right.
Which we did rehearse, believe it or not. But he, on the day of the recording, he slowly got really drunk. And I think he thought, I'm going to screw these whitey guys up, and so he did everything backwards, forwards, wrong arrangements, anything to trip us up, And there's this great story that he went back to America, and Robbie Robinson from the band, he was a great blues exponent, as you know.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I met these guys in England, and they backed me, and they wanted to play the blues so bad, and my God, they did.
Was Eric playing on that particular session?
He was playing, yeah.
And he kept up pretty well, I would think.
Well, he was. We were all very embryonic. I mean, you've got to remember the history came later,
right?
And Eric was still busy breaking ukulele strings and trying to work out blues riffs and things. But he did well, Eric. Actually, I think the whole band did quite well considering everything.
That's the amazing legacy of the YardBirds. So many iconic figures have come from the band. Eric Clapton first, and then Jeff Beck coming in replacing Eric, and then Jimmy Page on that. Do you stay in touch with the guys? Are you Facebook friends? How does this work anymore?
Facebook. We Twitter.
Good. It's a little bit easier these days.
Well, do we keep up? Well, I mean, you cannot. I mean, look, Henry here. It's wonderful to have Henry back in the fold again. I mean, these are experiences that go beyond marriage,
right?
Beyond everything. And they really do, don't they, Henry? I mean, it's just, you go through so much. I mean, you can end up hating each other at the time, perhaps. But, the sort of roots are so terribly strong that, yeah, we do. I mean, I don't see Eric so much. He wrote about me in his book, which was very nice. And I see Jimmy. Jimmy's great because he comes to shows and
Does
stuff.
he?
Yeah. And Jeff is always doing his thing. He's a bit moody, but he's around,
Now, let's talk about the current band. Jim Mccarty on drums, another founding member. Yep. And tell me who else is in the band now.
Well, I'm in the band, the two foundlings. We literally did found the band in '62, I think it was.
62.
Yeah, and then amalgamated with Keith Relf and Paul Samuel Smith from another band. But Jim and I were kind of asked by an agent in the mid-'90s who was saying that there's a lot of people who really would, if you could ever get the YardBirds back together again, miracle that it could be, they'd love to do shows with you. And at that point, I never wanted to move diagonally. I mean, I was very much into photography. Jim had his own stuff. But at that point, I was able to finally move a little bit, diagonal as opposed to up and down. And I said to Jim, well, if we could ever get a band together that had the integrity and the musicianship of the YardBirds, that could be quite something. So we kind of did a few shows, tinkered around with musicians and everything else, and people really did like what we were doing. They weren't unkind, and they kept asking us back to do more shows, and it snowballed. By 2000, we were like as busy as we'd ever been back in the,
Sure.
But now, because a couple of those guys came off the road, Jippy Mayo, wonderful guitar player, was with a great band called Dr. Feelgood.
Mm-hmm.
But currently we have, I say currently, he's been in the band 6 years.
Yeah.
Actually, longer than the band was together.
Well, this is
Is that right, really?
Well,
yeah, that's true.
This is the joke about the 20 years,
Right.
5 years.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, nothing was road mapped in those days. I
Right.
mean, we were doing things like, which way's the wind blowing?
Right.
It was really, it was like crazy. And, but anyway, yeah, he was 21, this guitar player, when he came to an audition. He was from an ACM, it's like a college for musicians, and he just blew me off my stool.
And his name is?
His name is, I can't remember, let me think, Ben King. They would never forget that name, and he's a brilliant player.
He didn't forget you, Ben.
No, of course not.
There's no E in the middle of it, it's just Ben King, right?
Yeah, that screws him up on Facebook.
Yeah. Ben King, let me tell you, if you haven't seen him on YouTube, Google the Yardbirds and look at some of the stuff. He's amazing. I mean, he's really... I mean, this is this is not some kind of kiss-up thing. He's really got the chops. And
it's in the last few shows, especially all the shows we did in Hawaii. Yeah. At the end, people would come up and they would come and search me out and go, you know, this is the best Yardbird band I've ever heard.
Wow.
And
that's great. That's a tribute.
And that's not just a compliment to him. It's a compliment to the other two as well.
Exactly. And
because they play together really, really well. I mean, there's magic on stage sometimes.
What you cannot do with any band is this is not like, you know, the popular shows we have today where you kind of, people come, you can't excuse me, you can't cough in an interview, can you?
You can cough.
Maybe you can. Maybe
we'll edit that out.
There you go.
No, you can't put them together on a drawing board, right? You have to. It's an emotional thing. They have to have a root connection with the music. Yeah. These guys that we have with the band now, they may be young, and that's great in a way because, we're almost a boy band again. But
carry the flag.
But they carry the flag because they come from all the right background. They love the same music. Blah blah.
And Andy Mitchell is also the lead singer who does a great job of phrasing. Much in the same way as almost the exact same way as Keith did.
Well, as Keith did, but also he's picked up that flair of 50 blue of the of blues guys. And in the last, even from last tour to this tour, there's been a big change in Andy's appearance on stage. I mean, he works an audience more. Yeah. I mean, he really does a great job.
And he's sort of done what Robert did. I mean, they've grown in stature.
They've grown it, yeah.
That's exactly what happened.
And David Smell on bass is
well, he's a young...
Yeah.
He's a young John Paul Jones.
I have to say,
he really is.
Again, I heard him. I mean, maybe I pick up on these things, but Ben, I just wanted Ben in the band, and as soon as I heard Dave, I wanted Dave in the band. And obviously, I made a decent choice because it all works,
Yeah, it's a good chemistry.
Again, the Yardbirds are playing at the Key Club Wednesday the 21st, the Coach House in Capistrano on the 22nd, Thursday night, and Friday night. This will be a fabulous way to spend your Friday night on Agora at the Canyon Club. It's a great place, and we're very honored to have both you gentlemen here. Thanks so much for coming by to KLOS.
Thank you for having us.
Totally, yeah, thank you.
Rave up the joints, will you?
Well, the thing is, I always say this is never a band that leans against the bar. I mean, the music is so great. I love playing the music again, and some of it's so powerful, and it's just incredible. I mean, the Yardbirds actually only wrote like 65 songs. It wasn't a huge catalogue, but they are all quite something, very different and very powerful,
absolutely. Well, it's like a lot of the Led Zeppelin songs. Songs like Over, Under, Sideways, Down should never be played. It should always be out there and be played by you guys as long as you possibly can. Everything from Shapes of Things, Heart Full of Soul.
Jimmy played with his other band. What was that song? What was that song? Something about being confused?
Oh, yeah.
Which was a Yardbird song along with Train.
And by the way, did Too Much Monkey Business make the cut this time around?
What, on the live playing?
in the shows. Are you doing?
No, I don't think we're doing the monkey business thing. Yeah.
From 5.
We have progressed from that.
It's great, gentlemen. Thanks for coming by and thanks for watching on 95.5KLOS.com.